Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of In My Opinion with Dr. Anansi. I'm your host, Dr. Anansi, and today we are diving into a critical but lesser known environment and public health disaster, the Minamata disease. But before we go on to that, I need to render an apology to every single one of you. I left without telling you people I was leaving. I didn't tell you people I was going on a break. I apologize for that. I had other projects that I had to concentrate on, so I needed to take a little break. But we are back with a big bang, back to back. And we decided this time we are going on a different route for today. We have decided to look at what's going on, talk about current affairs in a sense. And the most current affair is the End Galamsey protests or the End Galamsey fight and the oppression by the government and all that. But we are not going to talk about necessarily what happened on the protests. It's all over the internet. You can read, you can search for them. We're not going to talk about how the government is oppressing the populace or the citizens, or squashing their rights or trying to keep them quiet. That's not the main point for today's episode. Today we are going to talk about the Minamata disease. One way or another, it is actually related to the current state of Ghana, and it will shock you how there's like key things which happened decades ago, like in 1960s, are also happening now, and there's literally like no difference except for location. So if you're ready to go on this little journey with me about the Minamata disease and its relation to Galamsey today, stay tuned. So now let's go back into the 1950s to a small town called Minamata, which is located on the western coast of Japan. This town became the epicenter of a tragic outbreak of a neurological syndrome, which is called the Minamata disease. So what caused it, and how did this mysterious illness become so devastating to so many people, and what lessons can we draw from it today? So let's go into a little bit of history and a little bit of science, the science behind the whole Minamata thing. So what happened in Minamata that made it gain so much popularity? So Minamata was a town, like I already mentioned, a small fishing village where the people who lived there depended on fish. So it was a fishing village. So like they were fishing to eat and fishing to sell, basically. So one day, a company, the Chiso company, which was an industrial chemical company, built a factory in the area and was producing a chemical acetaldehyde. It's a compound that is used in like various industrial processes. So for years, this factory had been discharging its wastewater into the Minamata Bay. But what the residents didn't know was the wastewater contained mercury. Specifically, it contained methyl mercury, which is a highly toxic form of mercury, which is easily absorbed by living organisms including human beings. The mercury enters the water. It is absorbed by the fish and the shellfish, which are like the staple food sources for the Minamata people, the fishermen. So the mercury enters these organisms. The fishermen fish them, sell them, eat some with their families. But it wasn't just any mercury. Let us note that it was methyl mercury, which is even way more dangerous because it accumulates in the food chain. So let's say it goes into the water, it goes into the plants in the water, right? Fish will go and eat those plants. The mercury will move into the fish. Do you get it? Humans will go and eat, or whatever will eat whatever fish. The mercury keeps moving and keeps accumulating. It ends when its last source, or its last destination is dead. And even that, depending on the location of its last destination. It can move. So if the last destination is a human being and the person died and the person was buried, the mercury will move into the soil, move into plants because plants will pick them up and the cycle will begin. So that's the thing about mercury. It moves from organism to organism. And we humans, unfortunately, are on the top of the food chain. So we end up getting the highest concentrations. The first sign of trouble in Minamata was noticed in 1956. So, fortunately, it wasn't noticed in humans first. The first signs were seen in pets. So, cats. Cats were the first victims. They began to show very strange symptoms. Cats, because if you think about it, when we when fishermen get the fishes, they scale when it gives the women to then I'm talking about 1950s, they come and give it to their wives to prepare food. They will scale them, they will cut off their heads and throw certain parts of the fish's body away. Where these cats will eat this fish raw. At least how it is cooked. I don't know. I've not researched as to what cooking does in the mercury, but I doubt it does anything. So the cats will tend to get a higher concentration of it, and they are also a smaller body. They have a small um, total body volume in a sense, so it is easier for them to show signs and symptoms first. So they realized that the cat started walking in circles, they started convulsing, and eventually dying. Soon after, humans started experiencing some of the symptoms too. They started experiencing numbness in their hands and feet, difficulty speaking, difficulty walking, tremors. Some were getting mental disturbances, paralysis, and even in some, it was causing death. So we now know that Minamata disease is a neurological condition which is caused by severe mercury poisoning, and the symptoms can be very, very devastating. Like I already mentioned, the patients were losing sensations in their extremities. There was muscle weakness, there were tremors, there was slurred speech. Some were even having difficulty seeing, hearing. Others were having severe cognitive impairments. But then the most tragic aspect was that infants born to mothers who had eaten contaminated fishes were not spared. There was something called, or there is something called congenital Minamata disease. So even though they had not directly consumed the food, as long as the mother had consumed it, mercury unfortunately is able to cross the placental barrier. So the mother shares it with the child, and the child is born with neurological issues. Some of them have developmental disabilities like motor dysfunction and cognitive effects. The effects of the mercury poisoning aren't limited to like the individuals alone. The entire community of Minamata started noticing that there was something wrong. By the time they had found the cause of the disease, it was like 1959. That was 3 years after the Chisel Company was established in Minamata. Hundreds had already been impacted and many had died. The entire fishing community didn't just lose their health, they also lost their way of life. And this is the part that gets interesting. So for years, the Chisel Corporation denied responsibility. They said they didn't do it. And there was nothing wrong with the whatever waste they were putting into the Minamata Bay wasn't the cause. There were no harmful chemicals in there that they were putting into the Minamata Bay. So other investigations should be done. But then even though it became clear that the mercury pollution from their factory was the cause, it took a very long time for justice to be served. And this is a country whose legal system works. I repeat, this is a country whose legal system works. And it took them years for whichever company, this one is not like Ghana where Galamsey, we don't know which companies are actually, we just know they are small scale miners and they are many. But this one that we can actually even pinpoint, that it is you are the cause. We've tested the waters. There's mercury in it. It is coming from your waste. It took years for justice to be served. Chiso, that's the company, and the government authorities, they downplayed the issue. They dismissed its relation to the factory. But then, as evidence, unfortunately for them, as evidence mounted, it became impossible to ignore. So in 1973, after years of legal battles, the Japanese courts ruled that the Chiso Corporation was liable and ordered them to compensate the victims. But unfortunately, sadly, the damage had already been done. Thousands of people were affected. The disaster became a reminder of the consequences of unchecked industrial activity. Now, let us bring this closer to home. So in Ghana, our issue is galamsey, illegal small scale mining, which is now on a rampant across the whole countries, especially in regions with gold, Ashanti, Western, and Eastern. Like the Chiso Corporation, the illegal mining activities in Ghana are contaminating our water bodies. They are destroying forests. They are poisoning lands. Some people will be like, "Oh, but then but if they do it on the land, it will be better." Mm. You let us go on. You understand why they won't better. One of the most dangerous byproducts of this galamsey is mercury, which is the same toxic metal that causes the Minamata disease. In galamsey operations, the mercury is used to extract the gold from the ore. When they are done, they need to kind of wash and cleanse it in a sense. So they use water. Either they are getting the water from the stream and they can't get holes that are like 200 kilometers long. So they will be somewhere in Amasaman and their tubes will be in Weja. So they can just pour the water here and it will have no effect on the water stream there. They are quite close to the water bodies. So it's either they are washing off the mercury in the water bodies or they are pumping water from the water bodies to a site quite close to the water bodies to wash the mercury off so they can extract their gold. And when they do that, if it is on the land close to the water bodies, they leave the site as it is. They don't even cover them, which had been leading to a lot of deaths in the past. Putting that one aside, the mercury gets into the soil and plants around pick them up. People farm in those areas. Their food pick them up. Little animals, insects, whatever, will feed on these plants and stuff. Will be fed on by other animals and stuff. Will be fed on by others and will be fed on by humans in the long run. And we get this mercury into our system. If it is close to water bodies, once they seep into the soil, there's a high possibility most of them will find their way seeping into the water bodies, especially when it rains. It's quite serious, but I say that a lot of Ghanaians are kind of like downplaying the issue, which it breaks my gumption. It's funny, just like in Minamata, people didn't really grasp what was going on or the consequence of the whole thing till kind of like it was quite late. We might not see the long-term effects now, although galamsey had been there for a very long time. But on this scale, the effects are becoming very scary, very scary. Most of the water bodies are becoming brown. Funny enough, these water bodies link to each other. Recently, I heard one water body that links to Wija is polluted, is brown, and it is leaking into Wija. And Wija is also kind of like a source of water for a lot of people, probably Accra Hafa. I hear there's a dam in Wija also. So, hmm, Oh Lord God. God, oh God. And the funny thing is, just like in Minamata, the Minamata situation, the places where these mining takes place are places which are economically vulnerable. And for many rural Ghanaians, the rivers and lands are like their primary sources of food and income. Just like how in Minamata, the fish or there's the fish in the bay where was their primary source of income. They lost their livelihood due to the mercury contamination. And Ghanaians, we are similarly facing the same fate. They've been so polluted that even access to clean drinking water is slowly becoming a problem. I don't know if we are going to sit and wait till it becomes a problem before we decide to talk. I this reminds me of when I was in fifth year. I don't want to mention the hospital. Sixth year, by one of my rotations, I went to. It was one ward that I it was a case I reviewed with a very good friend of mine, Maya, and this person had lung cancer. And it was when I was reading about Minamata, when I was reading the signs and symptoms, the numbness of the extremities, it got me. It sent my mind to this person. I remember he had that numbness in the extremities, and he also had lung cancer. And he was a tailor. From conversations, he made it known that he lived in a Galamsey community. That's like 3 years ago. He lived in a Galamsey community, and he the chemicals that they use, he says, I don't know how true it is, but he said that they can smell it in the air. Like the air doesn't feel as fresh as it used to. So probably that's what it's causing. He had respiratory symptoms like coughing and build up of mucus and stuff. And he says he's not the only one in the community that's suffering from that. Probably it's not just if the air is apart. I can't really tell, but then most probably from the water and the food that they've been taking in, that is what has caused that. And he was such a nice soul, and he was spending so much because he was discharged, he had to go home, come back to go and to do some tests, come back, then allow had a date scheduled for surgery. And like the last time we saw him, he had come back after running all the tests, and he had come to see the medical practitioner to discuss the date for the surgery if there was a need that had to be done. And he said, I would tell you, I can't go into details about the state, his actual state, but then his lungs were not in a good shape. I don't know if he survived because I didn't stay there too long to be able to follow up on his situation. And this was 3 years ago. 3 years ago. And Galamsey is worse now than it was then. We will have people in our diasporans who will be saying, oh, it's a Ghana issue. Or people who leave Ghana and go outside. Or people are planning to go outside and be like, it's a Ghanaian issue. Let them take care of it. You forget that we export food. You forget that we export food. There are places called African markets. You're leaving Ghana to another country. You have this serious taste for Ghanaian foods. You cannot let go. Now, what trivia when you can't get the yam and the plantain as you want it from the whites. You need to go to an African market. And where does the African market get their foodstuffs from? From Africa. You go to the African market, you go specifically to the Ghanaian stores. Where did they get their food from? From Ghana. And recently I read a report by, I don't remember which body it was, but it's a body that checks these foods that are being exported to other countries. And this body is saying that they've been testing high concentrations of heavy metals in the foods that are being exported. So you are not in Ghana, no? Then you are always enjoying Ghanaian delicacies. Unfortunately for you, you are not spared the effects of this galamsey thing. You are not spared. We might have a direct impact or a direct feel of it because it's closer to home. So our water, our food, we are taking it all in. But for you out there thinking you are safe, but then our food, you are taking it in. Probably you have a better healthcare system, so you will live longer than I would if we are both to die of mercury poisoning. But in the end, you wouldn't be able to live life as you had wished or wanted to, or you want to live longer because you took in mercury. You are still poisoned by mercury, irrespective of the smaller doses in which you took them in. At the end, there was accumulation of mercury in your system. You started having neurological uh, issues. This issue is way bigger than we think it is, and unfortunately, we have um, we are we are ruled by people who don't want this issue to go out and want it to be a small issue, want it to be something that we can cover up. It shouldn't be so. This is it was you can irrespective of what you see, to a serious extent, it doesn't just affect us. Remember, we provide electricity to some other countries. So imagine if the water bodies are in such a state that we can't even be able to produce electricity from them, in a sense. Let's see. These other countries that depend on us for electricity too will now have issues. Now they will be affected. Although what's in the baby, what will be able to galam say what's over say when Yama. Now on not in baby, have no but such a person's paying for your resources. Now other countries are going to suffer. Now people way outside Ghana are also going to feel the same impact, the same detrimental effects. Let us be citizens and not spectators. If you can't go out to go and fight, you can have conversations with. When I say fight, I don't mean going through hands. To go and protest, to go and demonstrate, you can have conversations with the local markets women, the local people about the effects of these things. This is not an MPP NDC thing. This is a health crisis. It is a public health issue, just like any other public health issue. We all need to stand up against this because if we don't and it gets out of hand, and we telling you we told you so wouldn't save our lives. The ones causing this have enough money to leave or even stay here and survive. But you and I really, I don't know about you. Me, I don't. I don't have that money. I don't have that connection. I don't have those resources. So, or I should go to one of these embassies and go and tell them I'm seeking asylum from mercury poisoning because it is not doing. Hey. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today. There are more. Like I told you, I've been working on some projects. Yes, and I'll be releasing them soon. When I do, I'm definitely going to announce them here for you. You all will be the first people to know when everything is set. So keep on listening. Kindly share this message to your friends, your family, so we can all learn about Minamata and how similar our situation is to them, so we can all find solutions to this and stay safe. Have a wonderful week. Bye.